Actually, it was a customer of mine that I've
Welcome everybody. And it is now time for Indian Year, the 2014 Hemp Pilot Plan, and what's to come.
Check.
And you may start.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we're gonna get rolling here. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. We all made it. So the sky is not falling. Let's just start there. And we're gonna get started with some introductions for our panel. I'll go ahead and start. My name is Axel London. I'm the CEO and founder of the House of Brand Extracts. We manufacture and distribute branded cannabis products. I got my start in this space. Well, I'll tell you, I was busted for distributing cannabis and hash and psilocybin in Virginia in 2008, and that's when I left the black market and moved over to the activist side. I started the first normal chapter at JMU in 2009. I graduated there after studying abroad in London and moved to New York City, where I was a full-time street performer, playing bagpipes, as we did last night with this gentleman spitting fire. And that was kind of my first entrepreneurial spark, was street performance, where exchanging like joy for music and receiving some money. In fact, it's kind of interesting because that space, I was always dealing with compliance and regulation, where it was like, can you set up your pipes and get chased off by the cops or not? And I didn't get thrown in jail. I got pretty close to Barcelona a few times, but it was, it was skirting around to try to do what you do, and in that little microcosm of entrepreneurship, that was when that spark turned on. And then after that situation, getting in trouble with the law, I put that down and I started that chapter, and then I moved out west. And my first job in the regulated space was actually working for Obama. And in so doing, passing Amendment 64 in Colorado. So I was organizing teams of people to go to the field and knock on doors to get Amendment 64 out there, which was the first legal recreational cannabis in the United States. And at that time, I, after that, jumped into the private sector, worked for a company called Open Vape as one of the first 3 employees, working with 6 partners. Within 3 years, they were in 20 plus states and 5 countries and had 100 employees. And they are now a public company. In 2016, I left that firm and started my own business, and then started straighthemp.com. We built that to 7 figures in 18 months, and I sold my piece of that at that time and relocated to the East Coast, where I grew up, to bring what we had done there here. And I'll tell you right now, it was like time travel. It was like going back 10 years. And we're based in Asheville, North Carolina. We work with farms and product companies from Alabama to New Jersey, and have a market presence from New Orleans to New York. And so we deal with a lot of companies in different regulatory environments, and it's just different everywhere you go. And so I want to repeat, the sky is not falling. North Carolina's flip-flopped as recently as this week on their laws and regulations, and I was on a call with about 40 retailers a couple weeks ago and an attorney group, and there was this, maybe you all saw it, this very sensationalized article about like a panic button that an attorney group put out. I'm not going to name names or whatever, but there's a lot of folks new to the space that are very agitated by this sort of thing. But all I have to say is welcome to the cannabis industry. I mean, we're bringing the black market into the green, and there's some gray area in between. And it's like that also in other industries where regulations and compliance come into effect, and there's periods of time, you know, either grace periods or, you know, periods of time where you may be technically out of compliance. You may be technically illegal. I mean, if this doesn't happen on June 30th, then we're illegal, but it's okay. I'm used to that. So, and I'm not saying that in like a brash way. It's just, think about what we're doing. We're bringing a plant from the closet, you know, into the light, and it's just not an overnight easy kind of thing to do. So when I earlier this week, I thought this would kind of be kind of a dull discussion because North Carolina had already taken the federal laws and furthered them, putting a full stamp of approval on all cannabinoids, isomers, everything except for Delta-9 THC, and we were all kind of relieved, you know. And then this week, that was pulled. So now we're back on track in, I guess, like what, 5 days, 4, 5, 6 days to have, what's that?
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday. To have the whole program expire and have all of the incredible business that's helping so many people be technically illegal. And I mean, I think we can probably see, you know, with these political gymnastics that they're going to do something before then. If they don't, they're going to do something a little later down the road. They're certainly not going to be knocking on doors, you know, they're not going to send the sheriffs out, and we're just going to have to keep on going, you know, because in this space, it's not just a new industry, it's a new way of doing industry. And we are the ones setting the tone. And if it wasn't for people knocking on doors and having conversations, then we wouldn't be here in the first place. So it is an uphill battle, but it is a righteous battle, and it's leading to a good place. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and let our panelists do a little self-introduction down the line.
Hi, I'm Jim Thorburn. I'm an attorney out of Denver, Colorado area. And I've been in practice a little over 30 years. First 20 years of my practice, I was doing real estate and construction law. And we ended up in the downturn 2008, 2009, and of course, the real estate market was going down, so was practice. So I was looking at ways to reinvent myself. And a CPA friend of mine came to me and said, hey, I work for the cannabis industry, and we've got this tax problem, and it's called Section 280E. And I said, what's Section 280E? Had no idea what it was. And of course, that's the tax provision that is the bane of the cannabis industry right now. I said, we're looking to put together a test case to test 280E and see if we can get out from underneath it. I looked at it and said, well, this is interesting. I realized that there was no accounting solution to 280E, and that if we're going to challenge this, we've got to challenge the powers of Congress, powers of the IRS to do that. That's how I got my start in the industry. What I didn't know was that 15 years before, within this, when California and Arizona had passed their acts, that the federal government had done an official federal response and an official agency approach to countering state legal marijuana, which is still in effect to this day. So, and what we call the federalism dispute. So that's where I started. I started litigating in cannabis. I actually have some very notable cases that came out of the 10th Circuit, and the latest one was last year with Justice Thomas on standing in Hemp versus United States, where they did not accept review, but Justice Thomas issued an opinion about where what I think is, and I think a lot of people say, is the roadmap to Supreme Court review on this. So that's why I'm at. I've been involved, getting more and more involved in hemp and seeing that side. But I guess they call it, 10 years into this, I guess I'm considered an old graybeard in relation to a lot of people. But been around for a while. I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicolette Baglio. I'm out of Asheville, North Carolina. I am the founder and the formulator of a small batch craft hemp company. We do only body care and skin care, and really work to be activists and promote the wellness, healing aspects behind cannabis without the high. So we're part of that industry. Slinging cannabis in the South to women is a lot of fun. It's really hard. Most of my customers have not used cannabis before, so starting them with high-dose topicals has been a great start for us. We're niched into that industry, so I don't have a vested interest in the incoming marijuana laws, regardless of what happens there. But I'm also a policy activist in North Carolina. You may have seen me all over the news, locally, statewide, MJ Biz lately, because of what's happening in North Carolina. And I lead a statewide group of attorneys, activists, business owners, many people that, bankers that are being affected right now by this incoming, or outgoing, rather, legislation here and in North Carolina. And those bills are Senate Bill 762, which you just touched upon. That's getting gutted, or got gut on Wednesday in our House. And right now there are 2 bills in the Senate which could easily be passed but are stalling. So, like I said, we've got 5 days with the future of hemp in North Carolina. Even though, as it was mentioned, it's a long battle, it's a long fight, but having laws expire will create a very interesting gray area around legislation in North Carolina. I have a very personal story with how I got into cannabis from my mother to myself, and I won't share that today because we're here to talk about other things, but that's me, and thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Carrie Schaefer. I actually work with Jim in Colorado for Thorburn Law Group. We are a full-service cannabis and hemp law firm. So we provide litigation and transaction representation to dispensaries in Colorado and hemp companies, and then on the federal level as well. We do anything from tax to real estate. Our specialty, like Jim said, is 280E. And we kind of fell into, like Jim said, we kind of fell into the industry because a client came to us with a tax problem. And we're an interesting firm because it's a boutique law firm, but we got into the industry before a lot of these larger law firms wanted to take on these clients and take on the risk. And so we represent a lot of the bigger dispensaries and have just thrust ourselves into the industry. And it's interesting the knowledge you gain. We were just kind of thrown into an industry. And so, yeah, I'd like to say we're kind of the graybeards of the industry.
Hi, my name is Chris Suttle. I am the CEO of CIC Consultants, North Carolina's first political lobbyist organization created for the sole reason to legalize cannabis, psychedelics, and hemp protection in North Carolina. Those of you that also know me from my other work as an activist, you know the person behind the Change is Coming movement. And with the Change is Coming movement, I wanted to take my time during the introduction and just say to everyone that's sitting here, since I was here yesterday, and I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of you are already familiar with who I am. The wall that's been holding up, that's been keeping us dying in the dark for so long, every single time we have one of these conversations, every single time we get a piece of legislation that we can talk about in the state, in CGA, one of those bricks falls. And we get to remember what it's like to feel the sun on our face again. And it is very, very much past time that we allow those in the hemp industry to stop dying in the dark of a gray area that was created by its own legislative body in the state it operates in, and allow them to grow in the light of clarity. And one of the things that I focus on is representing people like yourselves that are sitting here today, where not everyone thinks they can afford a lobbyist. Not everyone can go to the NCGA 4 or 5 days a week. I'm fortunate enough to live right there in our state capital where I am there every day, regardless of whether I'm there for clients, I'm there for myself. I've lived in this state the majority of my life, and 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with an inoperable frontal brain tumor that I cured with cannabis. And I decided in that moment that if cannabis truly had saved my life, then I would make sure that no one ever had to suffer and go through planning their own funeral for their 40th birthday again, which is why why I created CIC Consultants.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. We have a great assembly here. Trying to think, there's so many discussions here. There's the state level. We're in North Carolina, so that's a very pertinent discussion, especially with what's happening. So maybe we start there, and then we can kind of zoom out to the federal and other states. So I guess maybe just even maybe from the legal perspective. I mean, I assume you all are familiar with what's happening here in North Carolina. Maybe you can just give us some insight on how that relates to what you've seen in other states, and what you think this kind of flip-flopping back and forth that we're having. And, from a Western perspective, I mean, I call the Southeast the Wild East now, because it is that. And, out West, it's pretty well gelled up. It's very regulated, it's very high barriers of entry, very expensive to get those licenses. And in the Southeast, and also across the nation in certain areas, there's a very wide gray area where there are psychoactive, medicinal, intoxicating cannabinoids that can be produced and distributed by just about anybody. And we participate in that, and we do that by self-regulating, by taking the standards that we are familiar with from a highly regulated state like Colorado or Oregon, and applying those to how we're doing business here. So there's the self-regulation of the operators, and then there's the government regulations, which are kind of always catching up to us. So maybe we could start, and go down the line again, or start from a legal perspective on where you see this going in North Carolina, in the Southeast, and how that relates to what's happened out West for the past 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I won't get into the weeds of the North Carolina statutes. I think we have a couple people on this panel far more familiar than I am, but I can give you a general background of what's been going on here, and why things are so crazy there. If you go back 150 years ago, cannabis, hemp, and all that legal, hemp was a very valuable commodity within the country, and this goes way back. Well, we started getting into the Prohibition era there. We had the 18th Amendment, and that was made alcohol law there. We had the Harrison Narcotics Act, which started regulating opiates and cocaine. That was 1914. Well, Prohibition was falling through the floor by about 1930. And in 1930, the Department of Treasury started the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which narcotics at that time was opiates and cocaine. But a person named Harry Anslinger became the director of the Bureau. And he didn't go after opiates and cocaine. He went after cannabis. And he turned cannabis into the boogeyman. And I think what was going on there is that we had these federal bureaus that were falling apart. They were losing all kinds of business because Prohibition was going away. By 1933, the 21st Amendment was adopted, taking away Prohibition. So they had to have something new to make them busy. Cannabis ended up being that substance there. So he went around 35 states. He got a uniform act passed in 35 states between 1930 and 1937. He got the Marijuana Tax Act passed in 1937, pretty much outlawing cannabis and hemp in all forms. So, fast forward 30 years, Timothy Leary challenges the Marijuana Tax Act in 1967. The activist Timothy Leary, he won in the Supreme Court, and the Marijuana Tax Act was deemed unconstitutional. So, the following year, Congress repeals the Marijuana Tax Act and adopts the Controlled Substances Act. There's a question of what to do with marijuana, cannabis on that. It initially was Schedule 1, and subject to what was called the Schaefer Commission, that was going to look at it and decide what the schedule. Schaefer Commission recommended no scheduling at all, but the Nixon administration said, no, we're going to keep it Schedule 1. So now we have a completely unlawful substance that is supposedly so unsafe that you can't even research it. Figure that out. Well, it's so unsafe you can't research it. 1996, California and Arizona legalized cannabis on the medical level. There is a formal federal response by the ONDCP. 16 agencies have turned into drug law enforcement agencies, and they are doing everything they can to make sure that state legal marijuana and cannabis, hemp, all that stays illegal. That's the federal level. Now, what's happened over the last 20 years is that the states have been effectively given the middle finger to the federal government, and they have been in adopting their own laws. Colorado was the first to actually adopt recreational on this. So you got to remember, everything that's happening on the state level is saying no to the federal government. Now, the federal government did capitulate some with